The last toast. I never thought the most expensive gift I'd ever give would be the one that broke my heart. That morning, as I signed the final check for Claire's wedding, a sum that would have bought a small house in another life, I told myself it was worth it. Every parent wants to give their child the perfect day, don't they? The ivory ballroom, the cascading florals, the orchestra that cost more per hour than most people earn in a week. I wanted her to have everything I never had. I just didn't know that everything would include a public execution. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it really began. Not that morning, but 6 months earlier when Claire called me with the news. "Mom, he proposed." Her voice crackled through the phone, breathless with joy. I was in my office, the corner suite on the 43rd floor, the one with windows that framed the city like a painting. My assistant had just left, closing the door softly behind her, and I'd been reviewing quarterly projections when Claire's name lit up my screen. "Oh, sweetheart," I breathed, setting down my pen. "Tell me everything." She did. The rooftop restaurant, the sunset, the ring, 2 carats, platinum band, exactly what she'd pinned on her secret Pinterest board. Marcus had apparently rehearsed a speech about how she made him want to be better, about building a life together, about forever. It sounded lovely. Scripted, perhaps, but lovely. "When?" I asked. "October. We're thinking October. The leaves will be changing and it won't be too hot and... Mom, there's this venue, the Ashford Estate. It's like something out of a fairy tale." I pulled up my laptop and searched it while she talked. The Ashford Estate was indeed something out of a fairy tale, if fairy tales cost $250,000 to rent for an evening. "It's beautiful," I said, studying the photographs of manicured gardens and a ballroom with crystal chandeliers. "I know it's expensive," Claire started, her voice suddenly small, "but Marcus and I have been saving, and his parents said they'd contribute, and..." I interrupted. "What?" "Book the venue, sweetheart. This is your day, your one perfect day. Let me handle the finances." The silence on the other end lasted 3 heartbeats. Then, "Mom, are you serious?" "Completely. You're my only daughter. I want you to have everything you've ever dreamed of." Her squeal nearly burst my eardrum. "Oh my God, Mom, thank you. Thank you so much. You're the best. I have to call Marcus and Sienna. Wait until Sienna hears about this." Sienna, the best friend since college, the one who seemed to live on Claire's couch more than her own apartment. I'd met her exactly twice, once at Claire's graduation and once at a birthday dinner where she'd spent the entire evening on her phone. "Tell Marcus I'm happy for you both." But she'd already hung up, swept away on a tide of wedding fever. I sat there for a moment, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Through my window, the city sprawled beneath a gunmetal sky, tiny cars threading through streets like blood cells through veins. Somewhere down there, Claire was probably already calling venues, her voice bright with possibility. My daughter was getting married, and I was going to pay for every single piece of it. The months that followed blurred together in a cascade of appointments, decisions, and checks. So many checks. The dress, a custom Vera Wang that required 5 fittings and cost more than my first car. The flowers, arrangements that would wilt in a day but looked like they'd been assembled by angels. The photographer, an artist who spoke about capturing authentic moments while charging enough to fund a small film production. The cake, 7 tiers of lavender and white, with hand-piped flowers and gold leaf accents. I attended what I could. The dress fitting where Claire emerged from the dressing room looking like a princess and burst into tears. The cake tasting where we sampled 20 different flavors and I watched my daughter's eyes light up at the champagne-soaked vanilla. The florist consultation, where Sienna, somehow always there, made passive-aggressive comments about roses being basic. But I couldn't attend everything. The company was in the middle of acquiring a competitor, and the negotiations demanded my presence. Conference calls that stretched into the night, red-eye flights to meet with board members. Meals eaten at my desk while reviewing contracts that could make or break hundreds of jobs. "Mom, can you make it to the venue walkthrough on Saturday?" Claire would ask. "Sweetheart, I have a meeting with the Tokyo division. It's the only time that works with the time difference." A pause. Then, "Right, of course. Work." That word, work, always delivered with just a hint of accusation, as if my career were a personal affront rather than the thing that was paying for this entire wedding. I wanted to explain, wanted to sit her down and describe what it took to build what I'd built. The 20-hour days in the early years, the investors who laughed at a woman asking for capital, the loans I'd taken, the risks I'd shouldered, the 100 small failures that preceded every success. The late nights when she was a baby, when I'd rocked her cradle with one hand while signing contracts with the other, terrified I'd feel her, terrified I'd lose everything. But Claire didn't want explanations. She wanted a mother who could drop everything to debate centerpiece options. "I'm doing this for you," I'd said once, frustration seeping into my voice. "You didn't ask me to work so much," she'd shot back. We'd left it at that, an impasse neither of us knew how to cross. The week before the wedding, I took 3 days off. Not because the work wasn't there, it was always there, a mountain that replenished itself no matter how much you climbed, but because Claire needed me. Or so I thought. I arrived at her apartment on Tuesday morning with coffee and a box of pastries from her favorite bakery. She answered the door in yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, her hair piled on top of her head. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming. I told you I'd be here this week to help with last-minute preparations." "Right." She stepped aside to let me in. The apartment looked like a wedding boutique had exploded inside it. Fabric samples on every surface, invitation designs scattered across the coffee table, a rack of bridesmaids' dresses blocking the hallway. Sienna emerged from the bedroom, phone in hand, as always. She looked me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Mrs. Harrison, how nice." "Call me Catherine," I said, as I had the previous 2 times we'd met. She smiled without warmth and returned her attention to her phone. I spent that day, and the 2 that followed, helping where I could, running errands, picking up emergency supplies, confirming vendor deliveries. The work was menial, the kind of tasks I could have delegated to any assistant, but I did them because that's what mothers do. What I noticed, though, was the way Claire and Sienna communicated. The shared glances, the inside jokes delivered just loud enough for me to hear but not quite understand. The conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. On Thursday evening, while I was steaming Claire's backup dress, because apparently one $15,000 dress wasn't enough security, I heard them in the kitchen. "I can't believe she's wearing that to your wedding," Sienna said. "I know. I tried to hint that maybe something more age-appropriate, but you know how she is. What is she, like 60? 57. But she acts like she's still 40. It's embarrassing." They laughed together, a sound like breaking glass. I stood there, steam rising from the fabric in my hands, and felt something crack in my chest. Age-appropriate? Embarrassing? I looked down at my clothes, a simple cashmere sweater and tailored pants, the kind of understated elegance I'd cultivated over decades of boardrooms and negotiations. Nothing flashy, nothing inappropriate, just me, apparently, being an embarrassment to my daughter. I finished the dress in silence and left it hanging on the door. When I came out, Claire and Sienna were watching something on a laptop, their heads bent together conspiratorially. "I'm going to head out," I announced. Claire barely looked up. "Okay, see you Saturday." Saturday. The wedding. I drove home through streets slick with rain, my wipers beating a rhythm against the windshield. In my rearview mirror, the city lights smeared into watercolor streaks. The morning of the wedding broke cold and clear, the kind of October day that looks warm but bites when you step outside. I dressed carefully in the outfit I'd chosen months ago, an elegant champagne-colored dress, sophisticated but not showy. Age-appropriate, I thought bitterly. The ceremony was beautiful. Claire looked radiant walking down the aisle, and Marcus, earnest, dependable Marcus with his accounting job and his sensible sedan, looked at her like she'd hung the moon. I cried during the vows, though whether from joy or something more complicated, I couldn't say. The reception was at the Ashford estate, and it was everything Claire had dreamed. The ballroom glowed with candlelight, the florals cascaded from every surface. The orchestra played jazz standards, while guests mingled with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost $50 a plate. I sat at the family table, watching Claire and Marcus make their rounds. Every detail I saw represented hours of my labor, not just the money, but the actual work behind it. The Singapore deal that secured the Q3 numbers, the restructuring that saved 30 jobs while improving efficiency, the product launch that opened new markets. This wedding wasn't just expensive. It was built on sacrifice. Quite the affair, said the woman next to me. Marcus's aunt, I thought. Though I'd met so many relatives that afternoon, they'd all started to blur together. Claire deserves it, I replied. You must be so proud. I am. But was I? Or was I just relieved? Relieved that I'd managed to give her this, to check this box, to prove that despite everything, the divorce, the long hours, the missed recitals and forgotten lunches, I could still be the mother she needed, even if she found me embarrassing. The dinner was impeccable. 7 courses, each more elaborate than the last. Wine paired to each dish, selected by a sommelier I'd flown in from California. As dessert was served, individual replicas of the wedding cake, because apparently one 7-tier cake wasn't enough, the DJ announced it was time for toasts. Marcus's best man went first, telling a story about their college days that was charming if slightly inappropriate. The guests laughed. Claire beamed. Then Sienna took the microphone. She looked stunning, I had to admit. Her bridesmaid dress, a dusty blue that complemented her complexion, fit perfectly. Her hair was styled in loose laves, and her makeup could have graced a magazine cover. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Sienna, Claire's best friend and maid of honor. I've known Claire since freshman year of college, and I've watched her grow into this incredible woman. She's smart, she's talented, she's beautiful. Honestly, Marcus, you're punching above your weight here. More laughter. Marcus raised his glass in acknowledgement. But what I really want to talk about is how Claire got here. Because behind every successful woman, there's another woman who wrote a check. The crowd chuckled uncertainly. I felt my spine straighten. Claire's mom, Catherine, generously funded this entire wedding. Entirely. The venue, the dress, the food you're eating, all of it courtesy of Mom's credit card. She gestured toward me with her champagne flute. 200 faces turned in my direction. Now, some of you might be wondering what Catherine does for a living. I know I was curious. Claire told me her mom works in... What was it, Claire? Business? Claire, sitting at the head table, had gone pale. But she didn't interrupt. Business, Sienna continued, that wonderful catch-all term for people who spend their lives in offices doing something. Making spreadsheets? Having meetings? Honestly, I'm still not sure. But hey, whatever she's doing, it must pay pretty well, right? The laughter was louder now, more confident. They thought this was part of the performance, a roast delivered with affection. The funny thing is, Sienna went on, Catherine's about, 60? And she's still working, still doing the corporate grind. You'd think at that age, you'd want to retire, relax, spend time with family. But I guess some people just can't let go of the hustle, can't accept that maybe, just maybe, it's time to pass the torch to the younger generation. My hands clenched around my napkin beneath the table. Around me, I felt more than saw the guests shifting, some leaning in with interest, others glancing at me with a mixture of pity and amusement. And the best part, Sienna was building to her crescendo now, the absolute best part, she picked tonight to wear that dress. Catherine, sweetheart, champagne might work on someone younger, But at your age, honey, you're trying too hard. There's no shame in dressing your age. It's called dignity. The ballroom erupted in laughter. Full, genuine laughter that rolled across the space like thunder. I sat frozen, each word a knife sliding between my ribs. Sienna wasn't finished. But seriously, let's raise a glass to Catherine. Thank you for financing Claire's dream wedding, even if it meant sacrificing your dignity in that dress. She lifted her champagne high. To Catherine! To Catherine! The crowd echoed, glasses raised, faces flushed with wine and mirth. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The room spun slightly, chandeliers throwing fractured light across faces that laughed at my expense. At the head table, Claire was looking down at her plate, her shoulders rigid. But she wasn't stopping this. She wasn't standing up, wasn't taking the microphone, wasn't saying, "That's enough, that's my mother." She just sat there, silent, while her best friend eviscerated me for entertainment. The applause finally died down. Sienna handed the microphone to Marcus's father, who launched into a much more traditional toast about love and partnership and building a life together. The crowd's attention shifted, moving on from the woman in the age-inappropriate dress, who apparently had nothing better to do than throw money at her daughter. I excused myself from the table, mumbling something about the restroom. No one noticed. They were all too busy enjoying themselves, riding the high of that delicious moment of public humiliation. The hallway outside the ballroom was blissfully empty and quiet. I leaned against the wall, my heart hammering, and pressed my palms against my eyes to stop the tears. 57 years old, 3 decades building a company from nothing, hundreds of employees depending on decisions I made every single day, millions in revenue, board meetings in 3 countries, negotiations that shaped entire markets. And I was being mocked for my dress and my failed career at my own daughter's wedding, a wedding I'd paid for. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the tears to recede, long enough to repair my makeup in the bathroom mirror, long enough to build a wall around whatever was breaking inside my chest and seal it up tight. I would get through this evening. I would smile for the photographs. I would dance with Claire if she asked. And then I would go home and decide what kind of relationship I still wanted with a daughter who'd let this happen. When I returned to the ballroom, dessert had been cleared and the dancing had begun. The orchestra had given way to a DJ spinning top 40 hits. Marcus and Claire swayed together in the center of the floor, while guests formed a circle around them, phones up, capturing every moment. I retook my seat at the family table. Marcus's aunt had disappeared, replaced by an empty chair that felt like a judgment. The music changed to something upbeat, the dance floor filled with guests, all loosened by wine and the infectious energy of a celebration. At the edges of the room, I could see caterers clearing tables, their movements efficient and invisible. That's when I noticed him. Robert Chen stood near the bar, a tumbler of whiskey in hand, watching the dance floor with an expression I couldn't quite read. He was Marcus's supervisor. I'd been introduced to him briefly during the cocktail hour. Mid-40s, sharp suit, the kind of competent presence that suggested he was very good at his job. Our eyes met across the room. He raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement, then made his way over. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, taking the empty seat beside me. "Hell of a party. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it." I am. Though I have to say, that toast was something else. I stiffened. Yes. Well, Sienna has always been spirited. Spirited. He laughed. But it wasn't a kind sound. Cruel might be another. I glanced at him sharply. He met my gaze without flinching. "I don't know you very well, Mrs. Harrison. Met you for all of 5 minutes earlier. But I know enough to recognize when someone's being made a fool of in public. I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine. Are you?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. Because if someone spoke about my mother that way at an event I'd financed, I don't think I'd be fine. There was something in his voice, an edge that suggested this was more than polite conversation. I turned to look at him properly. Mr. Chen, Robert. Robert, why are you telling me this? He smiled, and it was the smile of someone about to do something slightly reckless. Because I'm tired of watching people get away with cruelty when they don't even know who they're mocking. And because I think it's time someone set the record straight. Before I could respond, he stood and watched toward the DJ booth. I watched, confused, as he said something to the DJ, who nodded and handed him the microphone. The music cut out abruptly. The dancers stopped, turning toward the source of the interruption. Good evening, everyone. Robert's voice boomed across the ballroom. I hope you're all having a wonderful time. I know I am. Uncertain applause. At the head table, Claire and Marcus looked puzzled. For those who don't know me, I'm Robert Chen. I work with Marcus at Hartwell and Associates. Great guy, Marcus. Lucky to have him on my team. He nodded toward Marcus, who smiled nervously. But I'm not here to talk about Marcus. I'm here to talk about someone else. My stomach dropped. Earlier tonight, we heard a very entertaining toast from the maid of honor. Lots of laughs, lots of jokes at someone's expense, specifically jokes about Catherine Harrison, the mother of the bride, the woman who made this entire evening possible. The ballroom had gone silent. Every eye was fixed on Robert. Now, Sienna, that's her name, right? She made some interesting comments about Catherine, about her age, about her failed career, about how she's still working at 60. She's actually 57, but who's counting? She suggested Catherine should maybe retire, step aside, let the younger generation take over. Here's the thing, though, and I think this is important. Sienna clearly doesn't know who Catherine Harrison is. And honestly, that's embarrassing. Not for Catherine, for Sienna. Someone coughed. Silverware clinked against a plate. Catherine Harrison is the founder and CEO of Harrison Solutions. Maybe some of you have heard of it? It's only one of the largest tech consulting firms in the region. They handle digital transformation for Fortune 500 companies. They employ over 800 people. Last year's revenue was somewhere in the ballpark of $300 million. I could feel the atmosphere in the room shifting, like a tide reversing. But here's the really interesting part, Robert continued. Harrison Solutions doesn't just make money. It creates jobs. It provides opportunities. It changes lives. The company I work for, Hartwell and Associates, we do business with Harrison Solutions. They're one of our biggest clients, which means that Catherine Harrison's failed career is directly responsible for my paycheck, and for Marcus's paycheck, and for the paychecks of about 30 other people in this room who work for Hartwell. He let that sink in for a moment. So when Sienna suggested that Catherine should retire, that she should pass the torch to the younger generation, I have to wonder if she understands what she's actually saying. She's suggesting that 800 people should lose their jobs, that the companies we service should lose a critical partner, that decades of expertise and innovation should just disappear because Catherine is 57 and apparently that's too old to be useful. The silence was profound now. Absolute. I could hear my own heartbeat. Catherine Harrison didn't just pay for this wedding, Robert said, his voice quieter now but somehow more powerful. She built the career that made it possible. She did it in an industry dominated by men, at a time when venture capitalists didn't take women seriously. She did it while raising a daughter as a single parent. She did it through recessions and market crashes and every obstacle you can imagine. And she did it with more grace, intelligence, and sheer determination than most people in this room will ever possess. He turned to look directly at me. Mrs. Harrison, I don't know if you'll remember this, but 5 years ago, you came to Hartwell for a consultation. I was just a junior analyst then. You were considering a partnership with us, and you spent 3 hours reviewing our processes, asking questions, pushing us to be better. At the end, you told me something I've never forgotten. You said, good enough is the enemy of excellent, and excellent is what your clients deserve. His voice cracked slightly. That one conversation changed how I approach my work. It changed my career. And I'm not the only one. I've talked to dozens of people over the years who've worked with you, who've learned from you, who've built their own success on the foundation you laid. You don't just run a company, Mrs. Harrison. You change lives. He turned back to the crowd. So I want to propose a different toast, a real one, to Katherine Harrison, not just for financing this beautiful wedding, but for being exactly what this world needs more of. A woman who refuses to be small, who refuses to quit, who refuses to let anyone tell her she's too old or too ambitious or too anything. A woman who builds instead of tears down, who creates instead of criticizes. He raised his whiskey glass high. To Katherine Harrison, may we all be half as accomplished when we are 57. And may we all have the courage to never, ever apologize for our success. To Katherine, he said firmly. The ballroom erupted. But this time, it wasn't laughter. It was applause. Genuine, thunderous applause. People rose from their seats, glasses raised, faces transformed from mockery to respect. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, unable to move. Robert made his way back to me and set the microphone on the table. Sorry if I overstepped, he said quietly, but someone needed to say it. Thank you, I whispered. It was all I could manage. He nodded and returned to the bar, leaving me in the eye of a hurricane of attention. People approached, people I'd barely met, offering congratulations, apologies, handshakes. Marcus's father gripped my hand and said, I had no idea. Truly impressive. Marcus's aunt returned to apologize for not knowing who I was. Others simply nodded with newfound respect. Through it all, I kept looking at the head table. Claire sat frozen, her face white. Marcus leaned close, whispering something urgently. And Sienna had disappeared entirely. The party continued, but something fundamental had shifted. The energy was different now, charged with uncomfortable awareness. People danced, but with less abandon. They laughed, but the laughter felt forced. I wanted to leave, wanted to slip out and drive home and never think about this night again. But this was still my daughter's wedding, and I would stay until the end. Around 10 p.m., Claire finally approached me. She'd been avoiding eye contact all evening, but now she stood before me, her beautiful dress seeming to weigh her down. Mom, She stopped, started again. I'm sorry. For what? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. For what Sienna said. I should have stopped her. I didn't know she was going to say those things. Didn't you? The words came out harder than I intended. You didn't know your best friend would mock your mother at your wedding? Or you didn't care? That's not fair. Isn't it? You called me embarrassing, Claire. You and Sienna in your kitchen on Thursday. You laughed about my clothes, my age, my work. You think I didn't hear? Her eyes widened. Mom, I've given you everything, I continued, and now the wall I'd built was crumbling, and everything behind it was pouring out. Not just money, time, energy, pieces of myself. I missed board meetings to be at your soccer games. I turned down acquisitions to help you move into your first apartment. I built a company with the explicit goal of making sure you'd never want for anything. And tonight, I found out that all of it, just makes me an embarrassment to you. I don't think you're an embarrassment, she said, but her voice was small. Then why did you let her say those things? Why did you sit there silent while your best friend eviscerated me in front of 200 people? I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. You could have done what Robert Chen did. You could have told the truth. You could have defended me. I stood, gathering my purse, but you didn't. And that tells me everything I need to know about how you really see me. Where are you going? Home. Enjoy the rest of your wedding. Enjoy the band I paid for, and the flowers I paid for, and the venue I paid for. Enjoy every piece of this night that my failed career made possible. Mom, please. But I was already walking away, and this time, I didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying Robert's words, the applause, Claire's white face, the way 200 people had laughed at me and then, moments later, cheered for me. The whiplash of public humiliation and public vindication. But vindication didn't erase the hurt. My daughter was embarrassed by me, not by some carefully constructed persona, but by me, the real, flawed, complicated woman who'd fought and bled and sacrificed to give her a better life. And she'd let her best friend turn that into a joke. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine, real wine, not the $400 bottles I'd served at the wedding, and sat in my living room, still wearing the age-inappropriate champagne dress. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Marcus, from Robert, from people I barely knew expressing newfound admiration. I ignored them all, except one. It was from Claire, sent at 11:47 p.m. Mom, we need to talk. Please. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned off my phone and went to bed. Claire showed up at my door the next morning at 8 a.m., still in her wedding dress. Her makeup was smudged, her carefully styled hair now falling in pieces around her face. She looked like she hadn't slept. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. You're supposed to be on a plane to Fiji, I said. The honeymoon, another gift I arranged and paid for. We postponed the flight. I needed to see you. Why? Because I was wrong. Because I'm sorry. Because I don't want you to hate me. I don't hate you, Claire. I'm just disappointed. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. She should understand how that feels. Can I come in? Please? I stepped aside, she entered, the train of her dress trailing behind her, and we sat in my living room like strangers. I didn't know, she started, about your company, about what you do. I mean, I knew you ran a business, but I didn't understand the scale. I didn't understand any of it. You never asked. I know. I should have. I should have asked about your work, your life, everything. But I was always so focused on myself, on my problems, on my wedding. She twisted her hands in her lap. CNS said those things because I let her think. I let her believe that you were just some corporate drone, that your work was meaningless. And I never corrected her because somewhere deep down, I think I believed it too. The admission hung between us. Do you know why I work so hard? I asked quietly. She shook her head. Because my mother didn't. Because she spent her life dependent on my father, and when he left, she had nothing. No career, no savings, no options. She had to move in with her sister and spent the rest of her life bitter and diminished. I watched that, Claire. I watched my mother become small because she'd built her life around a man instead of building it around herself. I leaned forward. I swore that would never happen to me, and I swore it would never happen to you. So yes, I worked long hours. Yes, I missed events. Yes, I prioritized my career. Because that career gave you choices. It gave you freedom. It gave you the ability to have a $250,000 wedding without going into debt or depending on your husband's family. Tears were running down her face now. I never thought about it that way. No, you didn't. You just thought about what you weren't getting instead of what you were. You thought about the mother who missed your field trips instead of the mother who made sure you never worried about student loans. You thought about the embarrassment of having a working mother instead of the privilege of having an independent one. You're right, she whispered. About all of it. I've been selfish and ungrateful and cruel, and I don't know how to fix it. You can start by understanding that my worth isn't measured by how much time I spend attending to you, that my value as a person, as a mother, as a woman, doesn't diminish just because I'm 57, or because I choose to keep working, or because I wear a champagne-colored dress to your wedding. I know that now. God, Mom, after Robert's speech, I realized everyone was looking at you with so much respect. And I was looking at you like you were just a checkbook. That's how you've treated me for months. I know. She buried her face in her hands. I don't know what happened to me. When did I become so shallow? When did I start valuing you for what you could give me instead of who you are? It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. I think it started before the wedding. I think it started when you were young, and I was building the company, and I wasn't there for every moment. I think you learned to resent my absence instead of understand my reasons. And that resentment festered until it became easier to see me as a disappointment than as a person. That's not fair to you. No, it's not. But it's understandable. I made choices, Claire. I chose my career, again and again. I don't regret those choices because they led to something meaningful. But I understand that they cost us both something. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, painting the room in gold. What happens now? Claire finally asked. I don't know. I need time to process what happened last night, and you need to figure out what kind of relationship you actually want with me. Not just as a financial resource, but as a person. I want us to be close again, like we used to be. Were we ever close, Claire? Or were we just proximate? She didn't have an answer. Go on your honeymoon, I said. Enjoy Fiji. Think about things. When you get back, we'll talk. Really talk. About expectations and boundaries and how to build something real. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. But love isn't enough. We need respect. We need understanding. We need to see each other clearly. She stood, gathering her dress, and moved toward the door. Then she turned back. For what it's worth, you looked beautiful last night. The dress, the way you carried yourself, you looked powerful and elegant and exactly like who you are. I'm sorry I ever made you feel otherwise. After she left, I sat in the morning quiet and cried. Not from sadness exactly, but from release. The wall had finally come down, and everything I'd been holding back poured out. 3 months later, Claire and I have lunch once a week now. Real lunch, not quick meetups squeezed between her appointments and my calls. We sit at a small cafe near her apartment, and we talk about things that matter. Her work. She's a graphic designer, talented and ambitious in her own right. My work. And now she asks questions. Real questions about challenges and decisions and what it takes to lead. Our lives, separate and overlapping. It's not perfect. We're still learning how to navigate this new dynamic, still stumbling over old patterns. But it's honest. Sienna, I learned, is no longer in Claire's life. The morning after the wedding, when Claire told her about Robert's speech and confronted her about the toast, Sienna had laughed. I was just joking. Your mom needs to lighten up. Claire ended the friendship that day. Some relationships, she told me later, aren't worth preserving when you finally see them clearly. As for me, I'm still working, still running Harrison Solutions, still making decisions that affect hundreds of lives, still wearing whatever I damn well please. Because here's what I learned that night, standing in the ashes of my public humiliation and subsequent vindication. Other people's understanding of my worth doesn't define my worth, not even my daughter's. I am 57 years old. I have built something extraordinary. I have changed lives, created opportunities, and refused to be diminished. And if that makes me age inappropriate, good. The world needs more women who refuse to shrink, who refuse to retire their ambitions along with their youth, who dress beautifully, work fiercely, and never apologize for taking up space. I am one of those women. And I'm done pretending to be anything else. Last week, Claire called me with news. She's starting her own design firm. She has clients lined up, a business plan drafted, and enough savings for 6 months of operation. I was wondering, she said, her voice nervous but determined, if you might have time to look at my proposal, give me some advice. I know you're busy, but send it over. I interrupted. I'll review it tonight. Really? Really? You're my daughter. And now that I know you see me as more than a checkbook, I'd be honored to help. She laughed, and it sounded like relief, like hope. Thanks, Mom, for everything. For the wedding, yes, but also for being who you are. For teaching me, even when I wasn't paying attention, what it looks like to be strong. After we hung up, I looked out my window at the city below. Somewhere down there, Claire was building something, making choices, becoming who she was meant to be, just like her mother. And that, I realized, was worth every sacrifice, every late night, every missed moment. Not because she needed me to finance her dreams, but because she'd finally learned to value the woman who'd taught her to have dreams worth financing. The last toast was supposed to break me. Instead, it rebuilt us both.